Hi there, I'm Ella. As they said, I'm a product manager at Mighty Kingdom. Often that kind of doesn't mean a lot to a lot of people, so the way that I've described it in the past, I have a film background, so I sort of describe it as like the director of a game. But also, I mean, I've heard it said, and I actually like this a lot better, because it's kind of like the CEO of a game, because it describes more the role of, you know, driving that direction, but also having more of a like a revenue focus and a resource management focus as well. So when I was discussing what to talk about with you guys today, I was chatting to Phil from Mighty Kingdom, who some of you might know, and he kind of suggested I should talk about like what grinds my gears in the game industry, because I think everyone has some things that they would like to change if they could. But I'm not going to use this because it's not working. Decided that was maybe like a little bit negative. And I think it's going to be a good follow-on to what Matt was talking about. And yes, yeah, like remove that negativity and instead sort of think about as, you know, things that I see people doing or people not doing often, and think about like what opportunities do they present to some people. So what kind of things can you do if you want to stand out and fill some gaps that I kind of see within the industry. So I'm going to start with something super simple, super small. Diversity. It's something that we try and work on a lot at Mighty Kingdom for a reason. And that reason is every single piece of research indicates that a diverse workforce will outperform a homogenous workforce. And that's kind of like, when we talk about diversity, I think a lot of the time we think about this. We think about the genders, the ethnicities, the ages, the pixels, you know. And I think like, it's really often, it's easy to look at that and go, I don't see myself in that image. If we're talking about diversity, I'm being excluded from that narrative. But there's actually lots of ways. Diversity is a lot of things, and there's a lot of ways that you can actually diversify yourself. And there's a lot of stuff you can impact about yourself that does make you a more diverse candidate when we're talking about employment, especially. But I think also just generally within, you know, within the community and what you can bring yourself. The easiest thing you can do is impact your experience, diversify your experiences. I think because the games industry is such a passion-focused industry, I think everyone, especially in Australia, especially in Adelaide, for working in the games industry is because we have a huge passion for game development and games and playing games. And it's so easy to focus on that passion fully and really commit yourself to it fully. But I think often outside of the games industry, it's those experiences that really shape who we are as people and what we bring to the table there. As I said, I used to be a filmmaker. I take a lot of those experiences day to day at working at Mighty Kingdom. Is how I got a job at Mighty Kingdom. We have another product manager who used to be a chef. That was one of the reasons that we kind of decided to hire him over a different candidate. It's because we felt like that was a really interesting experience that he had, and it informed a lot about who he was and how he approached problem solving. There's a programmer who some of you might have seen around the place who has pretty much been playing organised sport his entire life, so he has a lot of team building experiences based on that. And then we've got actors, we've got other people who all have all these other interests and experiences. Also your skills, that is a huge thing that you can impact. I think it's also a huge opportunity gap that is really presented. As Matt said, not a lot of community managers with a lot of expertise floating around. That's something that you can work on and then introduce yourself to Matt. You've just expanded your network in that regard. Matt also said to me recently, there's not a lot of super crash hot networking programmers in Adelaide. Hot tip, everyone around here. And I think, like, for me and the work that we do at Mighty Kingdom, I'm yet to meet someone with like a truly deep understanding of ad-supported mobile game loops. slightly more niche for the audience maybe, but if you are that person, please come speak to me. And I think like, this is really easy to talk about, where it's like, just be good at something, come on guys. But I think, and it's so hard to find like what's not there as well. But when we sort of open ourselves up to talking to people, we all heard from Matt tonight, we got some great ideas there. If you can think about the people that you're talking to, find out from them what their needs are, and think about how you can, like, if you approach it from a community mindset, you'll probably get a lot of ideas there. Also, your social circle. I think friends can be some of our greatest assets. They can also, in some cases, especially maybe when you're younger, be a bit of a weakness. But they're often, I think, they're kind of they can often be a safe environment, like a really safe environment to retreat to. I think that's good in a lot of instances. But it's also can maybe introduce a bit of that kind of echo chamber thing that we talk about. There is an old phrase that I quite like, which is that you are the direct reflection of the 5 people that you spend the most time with. Those people are probably great, but if they all do the same stuff as you, they all like the same stuff as you, they all have the same friends as you, you're probably not diversifying your experience much there. So that's maybe another thing to have a look at. Diversity of thought. This one's a really, really hard one, but I think it definitely has the most kind of payoff by having the hardest kind of entry. Because it requires so much constant thought on our part, right? But it does require the least going outside and talking to people. So that's what I love about it. But, it really just, it's one of those things where if we can change and even just try and think about the way that we think about things, that's going to inform a lot of the decisions that we make and a lot of the ways that we approach everything that we do in our careers. And it really, I actually think, as I said, it is hard, but I think it's hard because it just requires that constant work. I like to think about it as like a 2-step process. You just kind of ask yourself, what is my opinion and what's informing it right now? What do I know that's making me think that way? And then if I was to ask someone who's as smart as me that disagrees with me, what would they say? And you just kind of start having that argument with yourself. And the great thing about that is that you will always win that argument, if you understand. So you don't have to worry about any of the ego there, but you're going to start that process and start that practice. But really, this is just kind of critical and strategic thinking, right? This is kind of what we're working on. And the more that we can do that, we'll get better and better at it. And when I talk about critical and strategic thinking, I'm really just talking about getting rid of your biases. I think bias is some of the biggest, I think especially in the games industry, it's one of the biggest hindrances we have as game developers. It's really, I think, working in tech, we see it a lot. I think, it's I like using this engine, I like this hardware, I hate this hardware. And I think, from a purely utilitarian point of view, that can kind of impacts the way that you work with others, right? Because they're going to be this person, they're basically going to devalue your opinion because they kind of know it already. If someone knows someone who's super cheap, you're not going to ask their advice on what purchase you're going to make because you know that they're just going to bias towards the cheapest option. So you're just not even going to inform them and it's really going to devalue your skills a lot of the time. And I think if we're all honest with ourselves, and we still are able to have some self-reflection, we're all kind of know the biases that we hold, so it's probably not too difficult to try and reflect on that and actively work on that. That being said, some biases are extremely difficult to recognize. These ones are what we call cognitive biases. So they kind of relate to the way that we perceive information and then the conclusions that we draw from that information. And I think every single person has these because we're humans. It's kind of our brain, it's like a shortcut that our brain gives us so that we can kind of do other things and focus on other things. But working to combat those, it's hard work, right, to combat those. but I think the work that we do to put in there to combat those is kind of like, hard work separates the good from the great, right? So that's super important, I think, when we're thinking about the things that affect every decision we make, really. And I think there's so many. There's probably a really you might have seen there's like a really famous infographic that kind of explains some of these cognitive biases that you're probably familiar with. There's like stereotyping is a bias, all of that kind of stuff. The two biggest ones that I think affect us when we work in the industry are personal bias and innovation bias. So I just want to do like a bit of an experiment. Who's making a game right now or thinking about making a game right now? Whose target audience for that game? Keep your hands up. Who's making it? Put your hand down if your target audience, keep your hand up if your target audience is males aged 18 to 35. It's pretty good. That's very good. Keep your hand up if you're working on console or PC. Hands still up, yeah. Now put your hand up if you're making a game that you yourself want to play. You're making it because that's a game you want to play. All right. This is some interesting. This is good. I'm actually really kind of pleased. I think I was a bit cynical about this because I think if we're going to remove our personal biases, and that's what we're going to try and work towards. It's almost, especially in the case of games that you would play, I think it's really easy to accidentally cut ourselves out of opportunities for success. I think here is a list of some of the biggest successes that the games industry has seen in the last 10 years. And these companies pretty much made all of this success by catering to an audience on mobile of women over the age of 35, which is often not an audience that we think about when we think about games. And that kind of comes back down to diversity as well. Let's diversify the people that we're thinking about when we think about the audience for our games. So these numbers are just 2017 revenue numbers. That's not even their entire. Also, what is amazing about this slide, the entire mobile gaming market is estimated to be at 35 billion. And that's King alone. That's insane to me. But I think and I talk about money. I don't think money is necessarily the benchmark of success. But I do think it's important to think about when we are talking about the types of games that we're making, because money kind of buys us the ticket to our next game. The assumption that I'm going to make about everyone here is that we don't want to just make one game. We want to make more than one game. So really sort of having an idea of how we're going to sort of make that be sustainable is really important. I think as well, one of the biggest points of contention when we talk about the mobile market is what we call the match 3 puzzle mechanic. So it's basically Candy Crush. I want to move. This is a good move. So yeah, this guy down here, he'll disappear, and then I'll get some points. And I keep doing that. I try and meet goals. Any guys know what I'm talking about? All right. So one of the biggest complaints that I hear often when I talk about these types of games, because it's a genre that I think a lot about almost every day, is that it's boring. People are like, I don't really play those games. And that's fine, but I think it's important to recognize that that's your opinion, or my opinion, or whoever's. Because there are billions of people that play those games, and they all generate all the kind of money that we just talked about. So objectively, that's just not true, because other people don't think that way. Other people don't find them boring. The other one that we hear about as well is the kind of derivative, the kind of the same. It's so many match 3 puzzle games. Oh, you're making a match 3 puzzle game again. Making another Candy Crush. Candy Crush is making another Candy Crush. But I kind of am who cares? If we're trying to remove and recognize our cognitive biases, then I think the question we have to ask is are we putting too high a premium on innovation? Are we trying to say that something's not valuable, or doesn't have value, or shouldn't exist because it's not innovative? It's probably maybe too far away from that spectrum. Because audiences love them. So why not make more of them? if we're talking about our communities and our players, you know, those are all people that play games. They're gaming audiences, so you know, there's no reason not to make them, I would say. These are all the match 3 games that are currently, as of today, in the top 20 highest earners on the iOS charts in America, which is the biggest iOS market. So that's more than, was that 30%, 25%? And I think it's really easy to look at and sort of look through the lens of innovation bias and go, there's no innovation in that, there's just all match 3s. But that's actually not true. Candy Crush was the first match 3 game to really succeed on mobile. They innovated by taking like match 3 to mobile, basically. Bejeweled was huge on browser and PC, but they really took it to mobile. And the other area that innovated and why they became so successful is because they had a laser focus on their audience and their audience behaviors and who they were, what they wanted, how to give them more of that, basically. Then we look at Toon Blast. Toon Blast is like they innovated kind of on that mechanic a little bit. It was a tap 3 instead of a match 3. Sorry, Toy Blast. Toon Blast is the follow-up to Toy Blast. Maybe should have innovated on the name of it. And they are really, like, they are what I would describe as the market leaders in sort of trying to have basically multiplier effect and multiplayer. So they're sort of one of the first games to really succeed in large-scale multiplayer and casual on mobile. And then Homescapes, this guy over here, Homescapes and Gardenscapes really are match 3s with a builder mechanic on it. So they recognize Playrix, the developer of Homescapes and Gardenscapes, really recognize the value in the builder mechanic and added a match 3 to it. And it's just huge. Like that, I think, would be one of the biggest innovations on mobile so far. They've just had like insane success. To the point where they kind of had a bit of conservatism bias in their follow-up game. You can see it's the same guy, and he's got a pet, and he's kind of just renovating a garden again, but it's also a house. So that's, yeah, I mean, I think when we can look at the market, but I think one of the things, and like one of the key things when we're talking about biases and trying to get rid of our bias, is that we're thinking about other people and thinking about our audience. And removing that bias is just sort of one aspect of improving our critical thinking and all that kind of stuff. But really we're just sort of like reassessing the decisions that we're making, trying to like look through the situation through a neutral lens, kind of like what Matt was talking about, just chill out for a bit, think about the situation as it is objectively, and really ask the tough questions of your game and of your choices and what you're doing. And of your decisions. And there's that common theme when we talk about games, I think, that we really have to be player focused. And why I'm really glad that Matt went before me. I think you really demonstrated the importance of that customer focus for your game and how much success is given to you. But I think the challenge there is that some of those tough questions that you're going to ask of yourself and of your audience are kind of going to reveal some stuff that maybe we kind of don't want to know. I think all too often, and I'm definitely guilty of this as well, is that we hear the phrase or we say the phrase, they're playing it wrong. Like, I'm not doing it, playing it wrong, what a bunch of idiots. That, it's unfortunate. So I think we kind of like, the way I like to look at it is having a caretaker mindset. And that's how we should sort of approach the way that we develop games. I think a lot of times when I say that, people kind of think of this. And that's kind of they're playing it wrong mode, right? Where you're just like, bloody audience and their idiocy. But I think really it's kind of this. Like you've kind of got to see yourself as being in service to your players. And really like don't be afraid to ask what your players are engaging with and what they like about your game. Even if maybe it's not the audience, like the answer that you wanted. Things like Matt talked about, again, really doing a lot of the heavy lifting for me. Thank you so much.
That image really speaks to me.
Yeah, like analytics, playtest groups, beta test forums, all of that kind of stuff is how you find these answers. Recently, I had a chat to a developer who has quite a successful game, and he was talking about how their game designer is like really strongly advocating like a complete overhaul of their game that's been live for I think like 8 months or something like that. And it has like a really engaged player base. So it's got great retention, all those things that they really like. But basically his problem is that he doesn't feel like the game as it is currently services an offensive tactics. Like the way that it's designed at the moment, players tend to play really evasively. He doesn't like that about the game. He thinks they're playing it wrong, basically. But I mean, they still play it, but they're just playing with evasive tactics in a way that he doesn't really like. So I kind of like, I think what this guy failed to recognize is something I think about a lot, especially when we're making a game, as we often do, without a sort of established player base, especially if that's your first game. Like when we make a game, we're kind of, like we're giving it to the audience, right? If you'll indulge me with this terrible stock image, we're kind of saying like, hey, we made this thing. We think it's a really great bunch of pine needles. Please take my pine needles and enjoy them. But I think what might happen, and what often happens, is that the players come back and they're like, it's not a bunch of pine needles. It's actually a banana. And I think that, and they're like, it was a good banana. But it's up to us to then go, all right, let's sort of think about that, lean into that, and make that like the best goddamn banana that I possibly can. And kind of be okay with the fact that it's not pine needles and you accidentally made a banana, but just like really, really, really like polish that banana up and tell you. And I think like so much of this is made so much easier when we kind of try and develop empathy for our players. I would say so much of life is made easier when we develop empathy, but it's a lot easier to be player focused and audience focused when we do that. Again, making some assumptions tonight. I'm assuming you guys are making games for other human beings. Sometimes you don't do that. So if there is someone making a game not for a human being, please come and talk to me. I'm very interested in that. But I think like, and I say this a lot, people who work with me probably get a bit annoyed about this, but I think empathy is like the #1 skill that we can have as game developers. When you can understand your users, put yourself in the mindset of your users, empathize with them, how they're experiencing your game, how that makes them feel, at what points they're going to want to stop playing your game, what they maybe liked about the game, what was surprising and delightful about that game. Then we sort of get a better, it's like pre-user testing, right? We get a better understanding, we can make a better game from the beginning. And I think that the important part of that is like withholding judgment, right? This is like not being like, they're playing it wrong, these idiots can't tell pine needles from a banana. I think it's like, we really need to just be putting all of our efforts into supporting that understanding of those players. And then the needs that come out of that player testing. But you got to be frugal while you do it as well. I think like when we talk about frugality, I'm not talking about money. I think that's something that probably everyone here is like well accustomed to. I'm really talking about your time, because I think as developers, that's actually our most valuable commodity that we have for ourselves. When you're trying to take a game to market and you're trying to find out like, are these pine needles actually pine needles? You really have to be very frugal with that and find out as soon as possible that you've accidentally made a banana and get to work on that great banana straight away. Because like, when you're investing your time in something else and it's so easy to get distracted by like what we love, again, that goes back to that passion. And it's like, I love making, this is not me, this is someone else. I love making like really beautifully handcrafted NPC systems or something like that. Or I love, like, your players don't care about that. You can buy a system from the asset store. Like, nobody knows that. I think people would be shocked. Everyone here can tell a story about their game that would shock a user into just like how much you like cut corners or something like that. But they don't know. Users don't know. So he's like, he knows what I'm talking about. You've been half-assing it this whole time. No one knows. But yeah, and that's just really about being empathetic and understanding, like, do they care? Do they care? If they don't care, it doesn't matter. Might as well not exist if the player doesn't care. But the more time that we can spend empathizing with those players and getting a true understanding of what they do care about, then we can be sort of like really attacking that goal. I think oftentimes it's really easy to sort of come to a bit of a debate and a standstill about what if a player is going to care about something, and I definitely get caught up in this. I think for there, I would say spend the least amount of time you can like discussing it and start implementing it, and just let the players tell you. Find a way to measure it properly. It might be like through analytics, it might be through your audience, it might be through a really fantastic beta system or whatever. But just measure it, find out, and remove yourself from that equation. And just remove all your assumptions by asking the players. Also, don't reinvent the wheel. I think, we've been making games for a while, maybe not like the longest time, but other people have been solving the types of problems that we're trying to solve more often than not, at least once before. So if there's something that exists for it, you're going to be able to save a lot of time, a lot of energy, and a lot of your resources if you just like get someone to tell you, or you take some code from somewhere else. It's totally fine. And I think just like match 3, like there's a temptation there to be like, oh, but I got to do it. I'm making this game. And I think like just like the match 3 analogy, like just because it's not your idea, it's not inherently less valuable. I think that's like a huge thing that people, and why we put this premium on the innovation bias. Like just because it's not something that you made up doesn't necessarily mean it's less valuable. So I kind of think like, in other words, just be humble. Like if you're using your critical thinking skills regularly, you're going to be able to take cues from the market and recognize why those particular things have staying power, and really apply that to your game and the way that you approach your development. I think like it's a tough industry. It's always changing. There's always something new to learn. And I think locking yourself out of success just because you didn't get there first, or just because it wasn't your idea in the first place, is maybe not the best move that we can make objectively. Deviation from that proven model, it doesn't stagnate the industry. I think it actually allows us to make a lot more smaller innovations on something. We don't need to completely, as I say, reinvent the wheel. Just give it some spokes. That's gonna like really blow them away. But that's like one of the reasons I really love the mobile industry. I've been doing mobile games for 4 years, and I think within that time we've seen 2 like major shifts within the industry, and that's super exciting, because I think at some point you get to the point where you are on that board and you've got all the money and you've got all the time, you've got all the resources. You are going to be able to either lead that, take a huge risk and lead that innovation call, or you're going to just be able to like make the game that you want to make for the audience of one that you are. And that's awesome. I think that's kind of like should be all of our goal, but we have to sort of like, give a little to get there first. So yeah, like let's remove the bias and maybe just look towards differentiation as opposed to bias. But I think like the biggest takeaway that I would want to leave you guys with, and I think if I was to sort of sum it all up, I'd just say like start asking why a bit more often, especially when it comes to your game. Ask why you're doing the thing you're doing, why you're making the game that you're making, why you made that decision, why the thing that doesn't appeal to you has sort of lasted the test of time in culture, and other people think it's so exciting and popular and fun. And like, ask why you think your player is going to play the game that you think they're going to play it, or the way that they're going to play it. And I think this is like, I say that not because I think we've all made, that you're making the wrong choices or anything like that. I just think that like it's really important that we can open ourselves up to the possibility that we might be wrong, even if we're like historically not wrong in other areas, and like we've been able to do things really successfully in the past. I think that if you can open yourself up to that change, then like we're all going to be better developers for it. So that's me. Questions?
Any tips for smaller development groups like solo or 2 or 3 people getting a handle on all of that stuff?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'd say, like, I tried to, I mean, a lot of the stuff at the beginning was about, like, getting hired, basically. But I think a lot of this is still relevant to a development group of any size. Especially when you're smaller, you have the advantage because you can be agile really quickly. And you can, if you guys are sort of interrogating your decisions all the time, and you have more than a few diverse voices in the room, you're going to be able to get to really good decision making sort of processes really quickly, and you're going to be able to action them really, really quickly, and you're not going to have to be like, all hands meeting, let's have a chat about this thing we realized today. So yeah, like I think that it's relevant to everyone, if that makes sense. I think it's good, I think, to try and, like, in a small team especially, try and hold yourselves to those standards and sort of say, let's not be adversarial when someone asks a question of some thinking or something like that, and really understand what the goal is, but have that critical thinking lens the whole time. So would be my advice there.
Should you say about repeating the question? Sorry.
Oh yeah, sorry. That was advice for smaller teams, like 2 or 3 people teams. Yeah. Cool. Excellent. Thanks, guys.